So, do I regret selling my ND2 with autopilot, with a Raymarine fitted, and buying the Deeper Quest bait boat with what many would argue has got an inferior sonar? Well, before we get into answer that question, let's start by taking a look at some of the things on the Deeper Quest that I really do like. Now, just at a very simple point, the aerial is connected. It's connected all the time, which means that you can just pack it down like that. And it means that you don't need to worry about losing them. You don't need to connect them up as soon as you get to the water. It just makes it really easy. It's such a small point, but it's just such a really important point. It kind of speaks to the design ethos and the way that they've built this from the ground up. So the other thing which is similar to that are these thumb screws here. Now, on the Deeper and other boats I've seen, you undo the thumb screws and you're left with like a big thumb screw that you lose, or just is cumbersome, it's just separate. These are captive. So what I mean by that is when you undo these, they are captive within the top cover. They're captive within the cover that goes over the battery. But I really like that. Again, just a really simple thing, keeps it all together, keeps it all nice and safe. The next thing is just that the boat itself is simple, intuitive, easy to use. It's really simple. I compare the two, I think, this compared to some of the other boats out there on the market, perhaps a little bit like Microsoft Windows or PC and Mac. Like, to me, this feels like it's intuitive, it's easy to use, a bit like an iPhone. Hey, like and subscribe and we might catch that fish. Whereas I found sometimes with the ND2 and potentially some of the other boats that I've used, they can just be a bit overcomplicated, just a bit tricky to wrap your head around. This, you barely even need to look at the instructions to figure it out. So yeah, brilliant, big tick there for sure. On a kind of same line to that, the ND2 that I had, where I had it upgraded to, I had a Raymarine sonar fitted in there, and I also had the injectors so that you could map the lake automatically and things like that. I had to have a PC tablet or a Microsoft operated tablet or an Android or whatever they're called. I had to have one of those. Now, my preference is for Mac. I've got an iPad, and it's a decent iPad. It's not top of the range one, but they're all pretty good. Whereas I ended up buying a cheap tablet just for the bait boat, and it was rubbish. It was so slow to start up and stuff like that. Obviously with this Deeper, I'm just using my phone. So I've got an iPhone 14, which means that I can just use the phone, which is, a really decent phone, and means that I benefit from the decent resolution and the colors and all of that good stuff. And I don't have multiple other bits to carry around. So the fact that it works with an iPhone or an iPad is brilliant, and it will also work with PC or Android based phones as well. But for me, that's a massive plus. So next up is just that convenience thing again. It comes with everything you need. You get a rucksack, you get a mobile phone holder so that you can keep your controller and have the phone actually connected to it. You can buy a separate tablet holder, I believe, and I've seen some aftermarket ones as well. But it comes with spare parts, it comes with literally everything you need. Obviously you've got 2 batteries, you've got your chargers and things like that. So it's a kind of all-encompassing kit. You don't need to go out there and go, oh, which bag's going to best fit it or anything like that. You've just got it all together. It's kind of plug and play from that perspective, and I really like that. In fact, what I'll do a separate video on everything that you get included with the Deeper Quest bait boat, so you can go and have a look at that. Kind of like an unboxing, but not quite an unboxing. But yeah, go and check out that. I'll put a link to it in this video somewhere. So next up is something that I wasn't entirely sure that I'd use. However, it's on the first trip out that I had with the boat, I did use it, and I was kind of just experimenting with it, but I could definitely see benefits. And that is the built-in PVA bag bait dropper that sits on the back. Now, what that does is you can put your PVA bag in there with your rig, obviously, inside the bag, and it's a separate dropper. It's also where you use, they've combined it, so that's where, if you wanted to use the hook dropper, that's where the pin is for in there. So if you just want to hook your bait off the back of that third dropper, if you like, and then keep your main compartments free for bait and loose feed, then you can do that. But the idea behind it is it keeps your PVA bag dry, so if it is chucking down with rain, you know, it's not going to get covered over, it's not going to get covered in rain and start breaking apart even before you've dropped it. And then once you've dropped it, you know, you just bring it back, and you do have to kind of wipe it out a little bit because it does get water in on the journey home. But as far as I can tell, no water gets in there on the way out, and the bag drops nice and cleanly. Another nice point is where you can check the batteries. And now this might sound like a really simple thing, but you can check the batteries on the controller. So you've got a status for the boat itself, and you've also got a status for the controller on the controller. So you've got a light system there which will tell you that. In addition to that though, you've also got a way of checking on the battery itself. So if you take the battery out, and you can press that button and you can see how many lights we've got coming up. Now, I have only used this bait boat for maybe an hour, and it's still reading as full charge. Obviously I can go onto the app, which is the third way of being able to check the batteries, and that will tell me on the Deeper app exactly what percentage battery I've got. So if you really want to check then what sort of level of battery you've got on your handset or the boat, that's the place to do it. But that convenience of being able to check in 3 different places is great. Next up, we get into kind of the features of the boat itself. So one feature that the boat does have is something called a stealth mode. You hit a button on the controller, I think it's A or B, I'll tell you which one a bit later. I know one drops every hopper, so it opens the 2 doors as well as the back solid bag hopper, but the other one puts it into what's called stealth mode. And what that does is it slows down the engine so that you're not creating kind of big bow waves, and it also turns off all the lights. So if you just want to creep up to a spot and get in there, you know, as stealthily as possible, as the name suggests, that's the button to hit, and that will just help you do that. So good feature, didn't know I needed it. It will probably get used, could be handy. The next one though is the auto mapping feature. Now, I did have auto mapping on the ND2, however, it was complex to use. It felt as though I needed a degree in computer sciences to be able to figure it out, whereas on the Deeper it's dead easy. So the auto mapping, you literally drag and drop a square, you take the area that you put it over the water that you want to map, and it will estimate how long it will take. So let's say drag and drop, it says 3-5 minutes, you hit start, and away it goes. It does its thing, and it does its little zigzag, maps your swim for you. So that is brilliant. The next feature, which I also really like, is this feature where it does the point to point. So what you do is you tap on the screen on the app, put a point 1, point 2, point 3, however many points you want. You can tap on the point again and then that will remove it. Tap on the points and you can plot your route. And what it will then do, once you hit start, again, it will tell you how long it will take and it will go. So if you wanted to map out, let's say, a margin swim, you can do that. The one thing I'd say is just be really careful when you're mapping out a margin swim. If you've got reeds and foliage coming over, remember the map will think that the water goes further back, because it does. So you've got a kind of best way to do it is to drive the boat to the edge of the swim and start from there and kind of plot it that way. But a really nice feature that that I think is brilliant is that those 2 mapping features. Again, just dead simple to use, and that's the important thing. Another really cool thing that I figured out with the the Deeper Quest when I first got it is it automatically saves your home point. So when you turn it on and you put it in the water, it saves that point for you. You don't have to go into the app and save your point or save your location. You don't even need to have to do any form of kind of donuts in the lake to set your GPS and things like that. It just plug and play, drop it in, it recognizes your home point, goes, that's your new home point, and away you go. Love that. A fish just rolled there. Like and subscribe and we'll hook it. Years ago, when I first got my first bait boat, I found myself in a horrible position of my bait boat running out of batteries when it was out in the middle of a lake. And I was fortunate the wind was blowing my way and it did drift in. In the end, I had to get my spod rod out, fill the spod up with water and cast over the top of it to try and catch the boat. It was pretty embarrassing, I'm not gonna lie. So the nice thing about the Deeper Quest bait boat, and I can't understand, having raced radio control cars in my time, and they have similar functions to this, why every boat just doesn't have this safety feature built in. If the bait boat goes out of range, or it runs out, or it's running low on battery, it will automatically return to its last saved home spot. That's just fantastic. Means that there's no more kind of panicking, looking at voltages and things like that. What, you know, is it low on batteries? Yes, you can check the battery level really easily, but you know it's just going to come back to you when it's really knackered. Now, I wouldn't suggest pushing it. People have said, Deeper have said that the bait boat will do something like 300, maybe even 400 meters range. It's something stupid. And I know people have tested it to over 200 in the groups on Facebook and say not a problem at all. But, you know, up to you if you want to go out there and test it to destruction and like see how far you can take it before it goes and then turns around and comes back to home. Or if you want to run the battery flat, you know, that be on you, that's on your head. But a nice fallback, assuming that it works, which I have no reason to think that it wouldn't. Another thing I like is the single-handed controller. Really simple to use. You don't have any controls on there for, you've got hoppers. Let's see, what have you got? You've got your controller, so you've got forward, backwards, left, right, and all the variations. You've got your left hopper, your right hopper, and your back hopper. You've got an on and off button. You've got an all hoppers button, and you've got a stealth mode button. So as far as I can tell, you don't have any place in there to be able to save spots or anything like that via the controller, but you do that all via the app on the phone. And as I say, there's this brilliant kind of hand or holster that holds your phone in place so that you can use the phone screen to be able to do that. But single-handed controller, really nice to use. It means I can have my rod in my hand as I'm feeding out line, you know, off the open bail arm, and just tap it out there, which is perfect. Right, let's get into some of the things that I don't like. The only way to charge the battery at the moment, and maybe Deeper will fix this, is within the boat itself. So the boat batteries have to be in the boat, and then you take the covers off and you plug a cable into the boat, and that charges the batteries when they're in situ. Not a huge problem, battery life seems to be pretty good on it, but it's a slight annoyance. I'm sure in the future they will bring out some additional batteries and maybe a separate charging point or dock that you can use. The other thing I noticed is that when you open the hoppers and you open them all at once, they actually don't open all at once. What they do instead is they open in sequence. So they go main hopper left, main hopper right, and then back hopper. Now they do it quite quickly, but they do go dun, 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 as opposed to doof. So yeah, that's just something to be mindful of. I don't think it makes that much odds, but if you were in like really heavy tow or it was really choppy out there and you wanted to put, you know, 3 different sets of baits down on one spot, then you might struggle, or it might just be a couple of inches out if the wind is really hammering through. Just something to be mindful of. The other thing related to the hoppers are the 2 middle hoppers. Now, when you open those again both at the same time, or if you open one and then go for the second one, they tend to hit in the middle at the bottom, and when they do that they make a bit of a clunk. I'm going to look and see if I can maybe put some like draft excluder padding across the bottom just so that when they hit they don't make that noise, because it is quite loud. So they slap against each other, and that's not ideal. That's something that perhaps Deeper need to look at. And then the other thing I noticed when the boat's out on the water is when you do a kind of hard right turn or a hard left turn or even a forward and backwards, you do get some kind of weird slurping sounds coming from the boat. Now, I have heard that on other boats. I think it's just the consequence of the way they operate and the way they're set up. It's not the end of the world, but if you're trying to be really kind of stealthy, instead of going up to somewhere, dropping it and doing a sharp turn, it might be better to go up there, drop it, and then kind of drift out forwards and take a more sweeping turn if you want to stop, you know, making that slurping noise. I'm sure the fish aren't going to be that bothered by it, but again, some people are more kind of concerned or precious about that, which is understandable, and some fish are spookier than others. So once you understand it, then you can drive accordingly. Another point that I'm not a huge fan on is I'd love there to be some form of audible or visual confirmation on the app when the boat has carried out a command or an instruction that you've told it to do. So let's say you've asked it to do the auto mapping. At the end of it, it doesn't actually say, it's not really clear that it's finished. You know, I'd like for the controller to flash or the app to flash, or even, as I say, an audible sound to say that it's done. And the same applies, you know, when you're dropping the hoppers. The lights do flash on the boat, the lights do flash on here. But again, something a bit audible or a bit more obvious would be better if that could come in the future. So then, going back to my original question, do I regret selling the ND2 with Raymarine and all the other toys it had on it and buying the Deeper Quest? Well, in short, no, not one bit. And I'll tell you why. The ND2 was excellent, but not straight out of the box. I had to upgrade it, I had to get some weights put in the front, some lights put on the sides, and obviously I wanted the autopilot and the sonar, so I had to get those retrofitted afterwards. Now, you can start off just by towing around a Deeper, which is what I started doing, but eventually I kind of just wanted a all in one place, you know, something nice and simple, nice and quick, nice and easy to use. And up until that point, I had an actor bait boat, and I really enjoyed that. That was a bit like having my first car, which I loved, you know, some rusty old Vauxhall Nova in pea green. The actor bait boat was so simple that I loved it. When I got the ND2, it kind of became really complicated, and I was like, ND2 on its own, not complicated at all, it's great. But once you start adding on other toys and stuff, it gets really complex. The Deeper Quest is the solution in my mind to that. It is the disruptor in the market. It does major on being simple and easy to use. And from that perspective, I love it. So owning a bait boat now that I'm excited to use, that I want to use, that is really easy to set up and use, that's fantastic. And that for me is the big win. Sure, the sonar isn't going to be as good as the Raymarine that I had on the ND2. There's no two ways about it. The quality is going to be different. However, it's perfectly good enough for what I need it to do, which is help me identify spots so that I can maybe drop a lead over the top of it and just be certain that I'm fishing in the right spot. So look, if you're lucky enough to have 1,700 quid burning a hole in your pocket and you're considering rushing out and buying one of these, the first thing you need to know is they're on back order. And the other thing that people are going to warn you about is, you know, you're being an early adopter. You could be the guinea pig and will be plagued by software glitches and mechanical faults that will be ironed out in future releases. And that might be the case. Am I bothered by that? Am I worried by that? No, I'm not. I don't think Deeper would have released it if they weren't satisfied with the quality standards that they got to. And the fact is, I've got a boat that is easy and enjoyable to use that I'm going to use more as a consequence of those feelings.